We have no idea what to talk about because we will answer now your questions. Please ask us everything that you're nervous about, whether it's about teaching or math, children, life, dinner tonight, but we can't answer that.
But it will be good.
Yes. Questions? Words? Yes?
Yeah, I think there's a thin line between the kid give me the right answer and the kid know what he's saying, you know.
Yes.
Now, you know, I make a question and the answer is 2. And many times they will say 3, 4, 2. That kid will say 2, but it's not enough. I cannot just accept this 2, and I have to look for it. And another way, the kid that say 4 could be right, but he was wrong after all.
Yes.
And I think I would like you to say about it, you know, because it's a very sensitive way of listening to the kids and thinking what they are thinking. It's puzzling me.
Great question.
I think one of the things that is most important is to get long answers from children. If you say, what do you think 7 plus 5 is? And somebody says 10. He may have a thought process behind that gave him the wrong answer. The typical school teacher says no, next, and hopes and keeps doing that until somebody has the right answer. Notice nobody has learned anything. It's just, you could perfectly well just shout out all the numbers you knew and the whole school year is finished. So the necessity for asking people why, or how did you get that, or really? It's sometimes very helpful to act as if you didn't know the answer and say, oh, is it really? Could you explain why? And I think that is far more educational than the fast, I need a quick answer, I need it right away now, you have to have it memorized. Life is not like that. In life, you are only asked questions you don't know the answer to. And you need to learn a way to come up with an answer and explain your answer. And schools don't do enough explaining. They just do right and wrong.
Did you notice one of the things that went wrong yesterday toward the very end of the class? Our question was, will 11 hops land on every number? And we got, of the 12 students there, we got 11 different ways of saying, I don't know. Maybe, I think, I'm not sure, perhaps.
What was the question? That's the best one.
That is so difficult because you want them to take part in the conversation, even if it's to say, I just don't get it. And then there's something that you can ask about and talk about and say, well, 11 hops. By 11 I mean, you know, starting at 12 and then taking 11 hops, which would land you where? And you hope someone's going to say on 11, but maybe they won't. By that point yesterday afternoon, they were tired, they were irritable, they were unconfident because one person had dominated the class, and that's a situation that a teacher faces every day when you want to draw everyone into the conversation. Play ignorance with them and say, you know, I don't know myself. I'm not sure. Could it be that? And then offer some absurd suggestion, something which they can laugh at. They can even laugh at you for suggesting it. Have them teach you, because that's the way they're going to learn. That's what you want to do. You want to have them be confident. You want their confidence to go up with their competence. Their ability to understand goes up with their self-image. And to encourage that, easy to say, hard to do, especially because you're dealing with as many different personalities as there are people in the room, as many different weaknesses and strengths. And you have to learn what those weaknesses and strengths are and how to play off them. Take your particular question. Someone says 2. Your question was, what's -3 plus 5? 2. Oh, amazing. He got it. She got it. Maybe not. Maybe it was the first number to come to mind because intuition somehow clicked in, or maybe it was a random thing to say. So say, really? Why? Why should that be? I thought it would be 3. And start a conversation and listen to the conversation as you're having it, which is a hard thing to do because you want to know where to go next in the conversation. Rather like speaking a foreign language. Does that help a little bit? Yes.
So even if I don't know the answer, for example, let me pretend that I did go to doing for some subject, and I just get it to a point that I don't know really the answer. It's not time faking, it's just I don't know. Well, I just pretend that I try to discover that time with them. If I really doesn't know the answer.
And is pretending to know the answer.
No. It's if I don't know the answer at all.
And admit it and just say, I don't get it. I don't know. That's a great place to start from because then it's now your duty to find a new way of explaining, or even better, a new way of putting the question.
It's also, there's a marvelous scientific experiment was done with children who were 6 months old. The experimenter sits in a chair and drops her handkerchief and looks unhappy. And the baby crawls across and picks up the handkerchief and gives it to the experimenter. There is in human beings, even human beings this big, a desire to help other people who have problems. And so one thing that can happen in a class is you use that as part of your teaching. So you say, I don't know. Can anybody help me with this? And very quickly, you will get a lot of help. It may be nonsense, but you have built a society of all the people who are learning in the same room. And then you get less of that, you don't know that, I know that, which kills any willingness to take a risk.
My question is, what to do with those children who just go through the book to find the answers in the end? Because one time
at the end.
one time I was teaching English to my 9-year-old niece, and I think I looked away for a moment, and I had just asked her a question like, how is pavão, it's a bird,
Yes.
in English. And she said it's a peacock. And I was, oh my God, it's so amazing. How do you know that? And she said, I just looked in the end of the book. You're so naive, God. and I didn't know what to do anymore. I just sat there and nice, okay.
I think you have a couple of choices. You can say, what a great thing to do, to know that there's an answer somewhere in the back of the book, and there it is to help you. Of course, you're not always going to have the book with you. How are you going to deal with times when you don't have the book? Well, you could always ask someone what pavão means, or you could ask me. We could talk about it. Strange word, isn't it, pavão? I wonder why peacock and pavon are different ways of saying the same thing. Isn't it strange that different languages have different words for the same thing? Aren't humans peculiar? Make it a more general conversation in which the child feels that she's on the same side as you, that you're both humans looking at this thing together, rather than trying to trick one another. Ellen had a student once who said, "It is not your duty to ask me the questions, it is your duty to tell me the answers and I write them down." Oh, what a life.
That was, I would say, very European. It's somehow on this side of the ocean, we're a little more casual. But this child knew there is one right answer, and you produce the one right answer, which is not like life. In life, there is not one right answer. There's always a way that you can come around and figure something out and invent it yourself. I mean, we're in a new world, and in a new world, you can be more independent. And I think teaching children to be independent and not just say, "I'll wait till the teacher tells me, and then I'll say, 'Yes, teacher.'" That's not bringing up children the way children should be brought up.
And yes.
As teacher, how can we include all children in dialogue? Because yesterday I could see the almost time Rebecca answering questions, and I would like to know that. How can we despertar? How can I say? Awaken the feeling in other children. This feeling.
Good question.
Let's start by saying that is probably the worst class I have ever been part of. I found myself looking at my watch. I found myself saying, maybe I should go for a walk. Because we had one child who dominated the whole conversation. And in the beginning, everybody was talking.
Almost everybody.
But then the boys looked at one another and raised their eyebrows and said, "I'm out of here." And no more conversation from them. They were a silent, angry group. And we hope to do better today. And I would say hope.
But it's a good question. How does one entice other people in? How do you remind them what they may not have thought of, that they're not there to please you and to get the right answer? They're there for their own sake, that they are thinking beings. One often forgets that one is a thinking being. One's somebody else's servant, trying just not to be hit, so you can give an answer and get out of there and be silent and disappear. So many people want to wear a cloak of invisibility, just sink through the floor. So I think eye contact, joking, humor, human humor, so that it becomes a dinner table conversation. And
hard when you're a young teacher, because when you're a young teacher, you are still hearing your teacher in the back of your head. And you think, I have to be strict, exactly, the eyebrows down all the time. And you lose the contact, and you lose the shared working together on something. And I think you do it because you're afraid there'll be a disaster. I lived in terror of my room gets so loud that somebody comes and knocks on the door and says, "What's going on in this classroom?" Then you're really in trouble. But to keep human to human conversation, we went to a teacher training exercise, and the teacher who was doing the teacher training was a dragon. Is dragon translated into Portuguese as a dragon? Yeah, dragon. Everybody knows dragons. She was a dragon. And one boy said, "I don't think this is an interesting question." And she said, "We think this is an interesting question, don't we?" in that voice that no human being except a teacher ever uses. And he said, "Yes, Mrs. Brown, we think this is interesting."
So he did learn something. He learned harmony.
Excuse me. When my children arrive in the school, he sits on the chair, and when I start the class, I move other chair. In your opinion, is it good to children or is not? Because when I left the como é que não sei? When I como é que se diz? Quando eu deixo elas à vontade.
Comfortable.
I left comfortable. She's learning good, but I saw some difficulties in some child, and I take the where sit and take the in front of me to have a more contact. But sometimes he don't like. What I should do?
I would say, always give your reason. Because if you say, "Come sit here," she may think it's because she was bad. She may think it's because you don't like her. She may think because she has a friend and you don't want her to be with her friend. But if you say, "Come sit here so you can see the blackboard," or "Come sit here so I can explain," I mean, why did you have her come sit near you? So that she could have more contact with you. And you can say that.
Why did you want her to move?
Oh,
Why did you want her to move?
what?
Por que você quis mudar de lugar?
Because I saw they have some difficulty, so I take the good students and put on back of the class, and I take the student have some difficulty and I put near to me. So I saw a good way to make they learn more and more.
I think you have a couple of choices. One would be to say, to give the wrong reason so that their feelings aren't hurt, and say, "I just want to mix the room up, just so I see different faces at different times."
If I can interrupt.
Yes?
In a school that a friend of mine went to, they had a fast class and a slow class. They don't call them the fast class and the slow class. They call them the tigers and the lions. So nobody will know which is the fast class and which is the slow class. First day of school, the kids walk in, look around and say, "Oh God, we're in the slow class." This is not something you can conceal, but it's something that you can, if necessary, talk about and say, "We're going to be working more carefully to make sure we get all the things clear," or whatever it is, which is your reason for having them come to the front.
How can I use or work the children questions without in circle, without change the subject and in the conversation? What's a limit? You understand me?
No, I don't understand what do you mean by what is the
What
limit?
a limit to use the questions building by children without to change the subject of the class.
Oh, I think you can change the subject of the class. You have to keep in mind what you did, what you didn't do, when you're going to put in the part that you skipped. Very important, at the end of the day, write down what happened.
So one question can be the next step, the other questions.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's often very good. And it's often very good to start one day by saying, "What were we doing yesterday? I forgot what we were doing yesterday." And children are very helpful. And they want to come and do something to you. They will crawl forward and they will give you the handkerchief you dropped. So,
Yes, the more it becomes human interplay rather than teacher and student, the more the levels become more or less the same. The more they're teaching you, the better the class.
You may actually know how to subtract. But if you stand at the board and you say, oh, now what? Kindly people will help you. What's shocking is how much nicer children are than you think when you first walk into your classroom and you say, these are dangerous wild animals and I have to tame them.
An example, I wanted to get across that it doesn't matter which order you go in, -5 plus 3 or plus 3 minus 5, that you're going to get the same answer. And I said, -5 plus 3 or plus 3 minus 5 makes no difference. And the student raised his hand and said, it does make a difference. You mean -5 plus 3 or 3 minus 5? Because at least in English, you use minus as a verb and negative as an adjective. So it took me completely by surprise. He was absolutely right. And it gave me a chance to say, thank you so much. That's a really good point. And then he felt, hey, you know, I could teach this class.
It's okay if they feel that a little bit, but when they push you out, then it's bad.
I have a specific question about Bob's speaking before, about what you did in relation to the size of infinity.
Yes.
You know, with children that are with which ages you do this?
What a great question. The answer is very surprising. We've done it with 8-year-olds very successfully.
And they got.
They didn't know it was hard. It's just another thing in life. We know it's hard. Oh, it's just the next thing that comes along in a complicated life. Matching up.
Riding a bicycle is much harder.
Yes, because it hurts. Matching up people, comparing number of people in the room with number of chairs. Well, what could be more obvious? It isn't hard like counting. It's easy like comparing. Terrific. Now, what's going to come up tomorrow when we do the next stage has a hard part of it. You'll see it's harder. And that was where the difficulty came up with them. Remind me tomorrow. Well, you'll know when it comes up. Because there are really only two ideas in this whole study of infinity. One is the one-to-one matchup, and the other, well, I'll tell you, it's proof by contradiction. And proof by contradiction
Slow down.
Proof by contradiction is hard. To show that something is true because the negation of it is false. Whoa. You have to do two thoughts at once.
Oh, so it's like this.
We spent a lot of time on that. I've tried this with adults. It was much harder with adults because they already knew. They knew you can't talk about infinity, and there's just one side, so what is all this nonsense? And as I mentioned, when Cantor came up with these ideas in 1857, his colleagues so excluded him from the mathematical community in Germany, he ended up in an asylum. And they said, well, that's right, because it's crazy. What he's doing is crazy. But once you get it, you see it's crazy deep, not crazy crazy.
Who did you say?
Cantor.
Oh.
Georg Cantor, he dies around 1918, something like 1840 or so to 1918. He is the father of these ideas, although, as I said, Galileo saw this earlier on. it's interesting, Aristotle, no, you can't talk about this because infinity is a process and you're treating it as if it were finished. You're taking the set of all the natural numbers. Well, there is no such thing, says Aristotle. You can't talk about a complete set when it isn't complete. So just don't talk about it. Which is why it was so many years, so many centuries before someone said, well, I can, and I will, and I try, and I do.
Of course, they did send him to the madhouse.
Yes. Yes.
This is the first time we're going to teach using this method with a totally different approach. I have to admit I'm a little bit scared. And
What's the scary part?
About, I don't know, the first contact with children using this method is totally different from the ones we use here in Brazil. So I don't know if I will be able to use this method completely correct in the first class, or I will have to take some time to use it correctly. What's your advice for the first classes?
First of all, it's correct in quotation marks.
Yes.
It is really yours. You shape it to your way of teaching, you shape it to your students. There are times when I say in my classroom, everybody sit down, take out paper and pencil because it is a madhouse. And there are times when you can have a conversation as if it were grown-ups at the dinner table. So it's flexible. It's not something you have to do exactly the way we do it.
It's why we call it an approach rather than a method. There's no method to it. It's very flexible. It's very human. Tailor it to your personality. You will do it very differently from the way I do it. I do it very differently from the way Ellen does. We have at Harvard 150 students. We can't have classes with more than 10. So we have a lot of graduate students teaching for us. And we, in some sense, train them. But they do it all very differently from one another and from the way we do it. Different emphases, different relations with other people. What we try to avoid is having that frigid, that cold teacher here and student there, to make it a human, humorous interchange of ideas among equals.
I think if you took the line, ask, don't tell, that gives you a good sense of the order in which it goes. So if I stand up here and lecture to you and say, this is the way you do it, and because I happen to raise my right arm, you have to raise your right arm, and it's all doesn't work unless you do it. But I think if you're thinking, how do I get the children to think about something? How do I make this, Bob says, a dinner table conversation. At the dinner table, a child may say something wrong, but you don't have anyone say, wrong, do that again, I want to see it done right. Well, except for table manners. Definitely you do that for table manners. But that it should be a conversation as much as possible among a group of people who are working together on a problem. And it's nice for the teacher because you're not responsible for everything. You're only responsible for people thinking.
And keep your plan flexible so that you can change as the circumstances change. For example, we ended the class with the children yesterday by saying, when we begin tomorrow, we'll talk about hopping on a 7 o'clock. Not a good idea. Not a good idea for two reasons at least. One, it will give the dominant child the chance to be dominant again, and we'd like to avoid that.
That was a disaster.
And we'd like not to poison today with the memory of yesterday. So we're going to do something very different. We thought about this last night. What we're going to do instead, and watch to see how this works, it may not work. We're not going to talk about hopping on a clock. We're going to talk about a line on which we will begin by putting a few numbers, probably 3, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in the middle and say, let's have someone dancing on this line. Now comes the most important question of the afternoon. What do you want to name the dancer? Yesterday it was Clocky with a K. We hope we'll take another name from someone else today. That person, then we ask the following questions of different people. Where do you want our dancer to stand, on which number? Which way do you want the dancer to face? How many hops at each step? How many steps? Then, could you guess where he, she, it is going to end up, and write down all the guesses? And then, let's see what happens. Their predictions, watch. Their predictions will get better and better as the afternoon goes on. We may ask for wild guesses to start with, and then tame guesses, so they begin to think. There were 3 of them yesterday who were counting on their fingers and blurt out a guess, but wanted to do some sort of calculation first. Will that be true today? Will they not want to take the risk of making a wild guess? Or will they have the fun of saying something absolutely absurd? Face right, standing on 3, take 2 steps at every hop, make it 10 hops. 2 million. Oh, 2 million? Write it seriously down on the board. 0. Interesting. And gradually see if a number sense begins to develop, if the context of thought develops, if, as I mentioned yesterday, you're all such a country of football players because you play it in the street. It's part of the texture of your lives. Can mathematics become the texture of their thoughts? Diego.
You could ask them to write the wild guess and the common sense guess, like give room for absurd and give room for this nice guess, and maybe the wild guess is going to be correct, something like that. You could surprise them, mix up.
That's nice. So the absurd and the reasonable guess. Yeah. Why don't we try that?
I have to share a personal experience because we are here talking about children. And he said that your method was so unusual and so different. I believe that the exact opposite because, I believe the simplicity that you both use, that's magnificent. I believe that, and there are other teachers who do that way. But you found a way that you can pass it to us, and I believe that's the real good thing. Because as long as the class is simple, that you both you take a posture that you treat the children like you said, like another human being. And I had a teacher that I think I talked about it, that my orientator, I believe is that the master degree. I hated statistics. It was Greek to me.
Has anyone ever liked statistics?
But
It's not really math.
Ellen has written a book on statistics. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you can say that. But when I had to use it to my paper, and then my orientor said to me, I ain't going to do anything for you. I'm going to do anything ready for you. There's the book, and I had the class with him, statistics, and he said, well, you have the packages, the software that give you the numbers. When you have the numbers on you, they don't mean anything. But when you learn, he said that in class, when you learn where the numbers come, how do you get them, you learn how to use them, why they're there. And when I did my dissertation, I saw that the numbers meant something together with the writing that I was doing. The numbers meant something to me, and I saw that, and it looked like magic. The numbers did mean something. And I believe that when you start to see it that way, and you can do that for math and for anything else. I mean, when the teacher, you just have to talk,
Yes.
face to face. And I believe that even us as adults, we can see that. Teachers who do that, you tend to like them more. I believe that's not rocket science. That when the simpler it gets, the more beauty you see in the teaching. I believe that as you both do it very, very greatly, that we can see that, and maybe we can be that kind of teacher. I believe that. Maybe some of us will teach math, maybe more than most of us won't. But as anything that you teach, when you make the children or the adult see that it can be a good thing, it can be a wonderful thing if they and when I did that statistically, you said, I tend then, to learn more about it, to go beyond the need I have to do for the exam needs and stuff. I know it's time to get interesting. Even statistics can get interesting when you do that. So I think that I know by little children that they get to market more than we tend to do. I believe that if you get them going, they will go all the way for you.
Indeed. You realize the wonderful position that the 50 of you are in. Not only will you be raising part of the next generation the right way, you'll be setting an example for how to teach to the next generation of teachers. You are the discoverers, the inventors, the explorers of this, who will change the character of education in Brazil.
I'm finding some relations with the way you teach, with some ideas of the constructivism. Am I right or not? With what actors do you work with? Do you dialogue with in your, in your theoretical base? I'm curious.
Explain. Constructivism has a lot of different senses. What do you mean exactly?
I mean by the idea that the children, by the ideas of Piaget mainly, and the idea that the children build his knowledge by interacting with the acknowledgement, with the things, with the ideas, and that's the way I already try to work to teach children to read, because I am a teacher, I'm a pedagoga in Yes, so I already try to teach in a similar way all the subjects. So I'm curious to know if there is something, some relation with the theoretical base in these ideas.
I think the first thing I would say is that Piaget thinks children are stupider than they are. He has children like this. He said, "What color is that?" "It is blue." That's not a conversation, and that's not learning. That's, in my opinion, that is a blue-green, and it's a nice color, and I like it. If the question is too simple, the answer will be too simple. And so I think, what are we hoping? That children will have complex minds, think complex thoughts, feel ready to try new things. The child who says, "I can't do that, nobody's told me how to do it," is somebody you can say, this person is going to have an unhappy life. Because we always find ourselves in situations we have never been in before. And you have to feel, let's try it. Let's see what happens. Whoops, that was wrong. Try something else. And that means the child has to have faith in his ability, her ability to jump into something and give it a try. Maybe then you run away. But you.
But that you told, that's my idea of, constructivism. To interact
If that's your
through
constructivism,
ideas or
I'm-
through things.
I am in
But-
favor of your idea of constructivism. Piaget says nobody could wash his hands before the age of 12.
I think
Very backward.
we're just,
Yes, I don't want to agree with that, but yes.
I think we're just more optimistic than Piaget, and think that children, that people, have more potential.
I don't think he listened to the children.
It may
I
well
think
be.
the children were all rolling their eyes every time he talked to them.
Well, what Ellen said, just said about trying everything until you succeed. I think it's cultural. You two, you're both Americans, and it works in the USA because you're culturally made to try everything, including the right thing. But we are not like this. We're Brazilians. We are how can I say? We will happen to stumble into children that don't know how to do and won't try because that's us, you know. I don't know how to explain.
We have them too. We have them.
Yeah.
We have those children. If you look in the slums of our big cities, it is so depressing. At the age of 4, they are well on their way to criminal careers. They're very clever. They're very shrewd. They have no morals, and they know how to dodge their way through life. And you see a horrible future ahead of them. I don't think we differ in that way. But I think we can be optimistic about the potential that is there in everyone. There was a young child I knew. She was bicycling, she fell, she scraped her head on the gravel and was bleeding from a cut here. And she said, "Look, I have a red road on my forehead." How wonderful! What a poetic image. If you can do that when you're in pain, if you can see that as something interesting, what can you not do? Take advantage of that. Let the imagination grow. And instead of always giving negatives to children, don't do that. Be careful of that. Life is dangerous. Emphasize the positive. Yes.
No,
No, please.
I never teach before, and I would like to know what can I do in my first class. I'm anxious. I don't know what can I do.
That's a question that we all are going to answer right now. It's your first day in a new school, and you don't know any of the children, and they don't know you, and they don't know if you're nice, and they're very suspicious, and you have something that you want to start right in. How do you do that?
How old will your children be? Sorry?
How many is 28?
No.
How old will the children
Your
be?
children.
Between 7 and 10.
7 and
isn't
10.
it?
Okay.
Okay, the expertise of the group.
What would you recommend?
Please help me.
I think that first you have to have a plan, okay? But I think that you have to, how can I say? You have to have in your mind that plans exist to be changed. So I think it's this. You have to have a plan. But in every
Like a backup plan.
every moment you have to change and you have to prepare to change. I think it's this. For your first day. Or perhaps two.
Also, it's important, I think, see, I'm talking too much. It's important that you not be depressed by a failure, because the law of averages says you'll have a wonderful class. You'll go home and you'll say, I am a great teacher, my children love me, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And then the next day, it's rainy and they can't go out at recess and they start poking one another and it's horrible and you say, I would rather be a bus driver. I don't think you get the license for it right away. But it's a very emotional job. It is not like being a typist. It is not like working in an office. And you're on your own, in the room, responsible for the character of the society. It's
tremendous.
Worthwhile.
It's tremendously
important.
exciting. And exciting means anxious.
For the first year, you will go home and go to bed. Yes.
I was thinking about when I'm nervous. Is it important to once the kids catch the idea of something, it is important. It is important to the definition of that thing we just taught. They need to know by the end of that. Relatively prime, for example, they need to know the name, the definition, the formality of all that.
That's a very good point. A tricky point.
If you are somebody who likes languages, and obviously all of you like languages because you know them so well, talk about where does the word come from. Because I think that's one thing children do. This is Joe, this is Bill, this is horse. You're not thinking about why. But if you do the etymology, why is this? Anybody know why it is? Or then they get a feeling that they're entering the world of thought, not just learn this, learn this, learn this, learn this. They can speculate. And that's what we want for our children, is they don't just sit there and wait for you to pour things in their heads. You want them to actively come up with ideas.
So for definitions, it's such a good point and such a tricky one. You want them to know the core of the meaning of the word. Let's take prime, because it's a difficult one. But you don't want to make it so rigid that they're not using their imaginations. When you're adding, I think this might be the way I went about it. When you're adding numbers together, what's the basic unit of adding? And you're hoping they're going to say 1. When you're adding numbers together, it's basically a bunch of ones that you're adding. Great. And then a lot of time goes by, multiplication comes up, and what's the basic unit of multiplying? Is it 1? Well, no, because 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 keeps being 1. If I'm multiplying 3 times 4, the basic units are 3 and 4. Oh no, 3, but I guess 4 gets made up of something smaller. A bunch of 1s, 4 of them. Oh no, I'm thinking addition. I mean multiplication. Oh, it's 2. 2 and 2. So the basic units for multiplying 3 times 4 are 3 and 2 and 2. No, just 3 and 2. So the basic units are the 2 and the 3. And there might be a couple of them in there. Oh, those basic units for multiplying we call primes. They're the prime factors, the prime elements, the basic elements. If you have a better name for them, let's use a better name, you say to the child. I wonder what the basic units are for 2 times 13. Oh, it's going to be very hard. 2 is easy, but 13 has a lot of basic units. No, it doesn't. It's just 13. Are there a lot of primes? Very few. Is there a last prime? Whoa, now that's a question. Is there a last prime? Well, there must be, because there are fewer and fewer as you go out, I think. No, they seem to bunch up here and there. I don't know. I have no idea. And then to lead them toward a proof that there's no last prime, That was one of the great works of art of the Greeks. Euclid's proof that there is no last prime number. This is mind-boggling. It's one of the great proofs of mathematics, and yet it's about one of the simplest, one of the first things we think about. So all of these different factors, proofs about primes, the way primes are involved in multiplication. Do we understand today, here in late July in 2013, which numbers are prime and what the order of the primes is? No, we don't. We haven't got the least idea. We don't understand the prime numbers, and they're the basic units of multiplication.
Even though we have a machine which has been typing out primes for, 15 years.
Oh, just rolling.
So we know a lot of them. If you want one, you can get one cheap. There are thousands of them, but it's an unsolved problem. And that, I think, is also another thing to tell your children. That it isn't that I know mathematics and I will tell you some of it. It's that I know a little bit of mathematics and other people know more mathematics and some people know a lot of mathematics, but nobody knows all of it, and there's new mathematics waiting for you children to discover. And it's not she knows the answer, I don't know the answer.
It's all
Why don't I go do something else?
Plus ultra. It's all ahead of us. It's all beyond. Life is not boring.
She has.
I love her question. Yes, I think a great place to start from, but there in classroom, I think we need to prepare a comfortable place with children and show for them that math is included in their lives, and video games and the other things they do, like
computers.
And computers and the other things, because it's I think to show for them that math is included in, how can I say, cotidiano?
And day-to-day life.
Day-to-day lives, yes.
That's
That's such a good statement. We all have to be quiet and admire it.
The kids love electronic games. Do you use in your classmates the video games?
no.
Not because they are immoral, not because but they're passive. There is nothing that the children are inventing with the video games. It's just pushing the keys and seeing what happens. I think what are we looking for is not hands-on, but minds-on, and we want children always to be asked questions that they have to figure out the answer to. And I think too frequently people concentrate just on the answer. Did you get the right answer?
Or winning a game. Whereas we would rather not have competition against others or even against oneself, but with the thoughts, coming to grips with them. I want to come back to your question, Daniela.
There was a game, it's called Incredible Machine, and it's like we have tools and we try to, for example, if I have this thing and I would like this machine to work, so I have to put the tools in a way that it works. So when I was little, we get together, all the friends in school, because we want to know how to make the machines work.
That's nice.
But it's a very nice game, it's an easy one. So we get together because we did think, if I put this tool, what will happen? And you start the machine and the machine or work or not work or work totally wrongly.
Yes.
It was very nice. So it depends really on the game, because there are games that help us to get together to try to think in a way, because this kind of thing, because I like, how can I say, to touch things and use tools on my daily life, and I also like to play games that have how can I say, it's related to that.
Yes.
So it depends on the game. There are games that even if you are, I just pushing a button, but this button is like when I'm thinking something. If the teacher asks me something, it's a button that he is pushing on me. So I start thinking about. Is that basically the same thing? The difference, the tools that you have, instead only sentences and words, I also have the technology thing one.
That's very nice. That's a very good
General
point.
question. How do you feel about video games and their usefulness for education? They didn't have video games when I was a child, so I don't think they're good. And I can't play them. It's not fair. Have you ever used video games in your classroom? No, it's too expensive. But is there room in the schools for video games?
The computer, I have radio, not video
Computers,
games.
yes, obviously, especially like in a science class, to do the kind of arithmetic you need for science, it's marvelous. I mean, I'm a great believer in calculators and computers because you don't spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what is 17 times 93, which anybody know? Haha, no.
What were you going to say? Okay. Let me show you a game which I think is an interesting game. It's a deep game, and it's a lot of fun to play. You give each child that 5x5 grid, and you say, if you start in the upper left corner, and you're allowed to move only up and down or left and right, not on a diagonal, always keeping your pencil on the paper, can you go through every square once and only once? You can't go into a square that you've already been in. Well, it sounds awfully innocent. Sounds, oh, hey, that's going to be easy. Or maybe, I'm not sure. So children will try. One child will start down, one child may start to the right. So, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I guess it can't be done. Another child says, why did you go straight down there? So maybe, although this was a possible path, maybe it wasn't a useful one. Maybe instead, I'll go down here, and now a systematic child will say, oh, you want to go across? Okay. Yes? You were gesturing this way?
Yes, from the edges, then you go inside and complete it.
Oh, okay. Like that?
Yeah, I can do
Oh, okay.
Done.
Oh, how wonderful. It worked. Terrific. And different children will have different paths. Then you say, great. What if instead of starting there, same rules, what if you started there? Now, someone who's thinking about it will say, well, sure, starting there is the same as starting in the upper right, is the same as starting in the upper left, it's just you turn the paper. Where else do you know you could start from? Well, lower left or lower right. Great. There are 4 places you can start from, and it will always work. And then someone tries, well, it's going to work from everywhere. Terrific.
Away from your work of art.
Okay, I want to modify it. I want to now say, instead of starting from one of the 4 corners, which we now know works, what if you started from here? That was the right expression.
I'm going to get rid of your...
Oh, good, thank you.
While you're thinking.
Yeah, go on. Is that working? Are you going like this?
This is going to look so good on the video. You're all
And
sitting
then-
here.
I have only one choice here. I've got to go here. Down, down. I'm getting opposite directions. Some say go left, some say up. Up.
I think left, down.
Não vai?
Não
vai dar.
Left.
Continua lá embaixo, continua.
Left. Right. Up. Left. Up.
Oops.
Deixa eu pensar numa outra coisa.
Left.
Begin.
This is great. We can tell you're really working. You're all speaking in Portuguese.
Begin going to my left. It's just go down. Going to the left. The other side.
Aqui.
Estragou, foi tudo agora.
I think you already were in here.
Agora não consigo pensar com muito ritmo. Vamos ver voltando.
You went in the squares. You can't go in it again.
Can you make?
Do you want me to redraw?
Yeah.
Voltando. Vai ser por aqui.
No, I don't remember.
Interesting, isn't it? Children love this. Yes? Shall I erase and redraw? Okay. Now,
Do you have?
down or up, across?
He has an idea.
Left. Get rid of that troublesome square right away.
I have.
Now I have no choice. I've got to go down.
He had first.
Down. Down. Down.
Right.
I have to.
Up. Vai encaixar ali. All the way. No.
All the way.
Up. Yes. Left.
Before I
Left.
I can't go left.
Right.
Before I go right,
Right.
is there a problem ahead? Right. Okay, I'll go right.
Right. Down. Up.
Up.
Down.
Então eu fiz. Não,
Yeah,
eles estão
the
dizendo-
down people are fighting the other.
I seem to have three choices here. Down or right or up?
Up.
Because you worry about that getting isolated.
Yes. Up.
Have to go right.
Right. Down.
I have to go down.
Down. Assim, depois vai para terminar.
Are you worried?
Não, vai sobrar
Half of you are worried.
Sobrar Trabalho de casa.
Is there a way?
I don't know.
Wherever you go.
Because, say it again, because I heard a sentence beginning because wherever you...
Set down just one.
Não, desse jeito tem que tampar.
No. Down just one before this.
Esse jeito que tava sobre aquele
Before this.
You worry about this. Put it this way. If this works, where do you have to end? In that. You have to end here because there's only one way in. So you're here somewhere, you're going to end here, so you've got to get to here. And the only way to get to here is from here. So the last two moves are those. Now you've got a new problem.
Before this movement.
Desse jeito.
Isn't this a great problem? It was so easy from the corner.
I think this should be the symbol of this meeting. We should have this on our letterhead.
It's a 5x5 grid. It works from any of the four corners. There seems to be a slight problem from the second square. If we were to number the squares with two coordinates, horizontal coordinate and vertical coordinate, starting from 1, 1 worked. Starting from 1, 2, we're having troubles so far. It might work, we just haven't found it yet. But there's some deep mathematics behind this. Why does it work from one and not from another? It is 5x5. Oh, what's 5 times 5? Oh, I don't know. Huh. Well, to be continued tomorrow. It's a great thing for children to play with, for 5-year-olds to play with, because very much like you, they'll say, "Oh, of course I can do this." It's just, well, okay. No, I made a wrong move early on. I'll fix that. No, okay.
It's very good for their vocabulary. One 5-year-old said, "I have a temporary problem." It's a very useful phrase to have in mathematics.
And they're going to learn something about odd numbers and even numbers.
And patience.
And patience.
Which is very useful for other subjects too.
I only brought this up as a counterexample to computer games. It's very low tech. A piece of paper and a pencil. And it's instantly challenging and mysterious. From which squares can you start from all of them? We just have been a little stupid, in the way we started from the second square. Or are there some squares you can't start from? And if you can't successfully start from here, what about there? Or there? Or there? There's a lot of math here. A lot of math. What if we did it on a 4x4 grid instead? That would be interesting. What about a 3x3? What about a 2x2? Think of a 2x2 grid. Just square, 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 square. Can you start from anywhere and cover everything? Sure. Piece of cake. That's interesting. So 2x2, which I think is 4 an even number.
And I think I can do a path.
Starting from anywhere.
Nice path. Nice path. Nice path. Nice path.
Why is 2x2 easy and 5x5 at the very least mysterious?
Well, odd numbers are the devil's work.
So I think we should stop on this problem anyway and think about it for tomorrow. I don't have the top.
Who took the top?
I'll tell you what, let's just bury it on the tray. Have we gotten too far off the subject? Have you more questions? Now, your question is such a permanent, good question. How on earth do you begin on the first day? And that first day is so important, you know, because it's going to leave the lasting impression. Friendliness, high spirits, optimism, even if you're not feeling it. And think of these as future friends of yours. They're going to be friends for life, these children.
There's only one thing that I think is very important that they don't tell you in schools of education. And that is that you should tell the truth. And all of the pedagogy is all about how you can persuade somebody of something, or how you can essentially trick people into doing something, trick people into liking something. I think it's immoral. I think it is wrong. I think you don't say, this is easy, when you know perfectly well that when you were 6 you went home crying every night. I think you have to assume that you're talking to small human beings, not to some kind of animal who will eventually become a human being later. And I think that sense that you can tell the truth to your students. You can even say, I have no idea. I can't answer that question. I'll go home and work on it. And they look at you like, you do not know everything? Maybe there's hope for me. And it can be very good.
I have a feeling we're running out of time. Well, what time is it?
Oh, people are getting hungry. You can hear stomachs.
Yes. So to be continued.